Good morning. We'd like to welcome you to another edition of the Sunday School Review. This week's Sunday School lesson is entitled, Is It Lawful to Heal on the Sabbath Day? Now, the subject is taken from verse 3, the latter clause of verse 3. Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath day? Now, our lesson today is in Luke. Luke is the author of the book that bears his name and also the Acts of the Apostles. Now, Luke is considered by some as one of the most comprehensive gospels. Now, Luke is the only Gentile writer of the scriptures. Now, our lesson is in the 14th chapter of Luke, verses 1 through 6. There are two outlines in our lesson today. The first outline is a dual setup, and that is verses 1 through 4 of the 14th chapter. And the second outline is verses 5 and 6, and it's entitled Going Against the Grain. Now, let's go here to our first set of scriptures here. That is the first outline. Okay, a dual setup. Now, let's read verse 1. And it came to pass as he went into the house of one of the chief Pharisees to eat bread on the Sabbath, and they watched him. As I said, it's a setup, and Jesus knew that. And many times when you go to a dinner invitation, it's for fellowship and things of that nature. But this was not for fellowship. This was to watch Jesus, to scrutinize his actions and hope that he would make a mistake so they could discredit his work and his character. Now, let's look at the verse here. This was the second invitation. Last week, it was an invitation also to dine at a Pharisee's. Now, this was the second invitation at one of the house of the chief Pharisees. And we talked last week, and we've been talking before, about the Pharisees were strict observance of the law of Moses. Okay, they were concerned about the letter of the law, not so much about the spirit of the law, but the letter of the law. Okay, so this was on the Sabbath, and they were, as verse 1 said, and they watched him. Basically, it was a setup, and they watched him, and they were trying to see if he would break the Sabbath law, the law of the Sabbath. Now, the Pharisees were very traditional. They had many rules and regulations and traditions, and they also added categories and subcategories to the law. Remember I said last week about washing your hands before meals? Now, initially that was applied to the priests. And so the Pharisees said, well, now from a sanitary, we talked about it last week, from a sanitary standpoint, that's good to eat with clean hands. But that was required of the priest. Now, it didn't say that others couldn't wash your hand, but then the Pharisees applied it to everyone, not just the priest, but everyone. And that's what they scrutinized him on last week. But this week, they scrutinized him on a different area, the law of the Sabbath. They had added additional restrictions to the Sabbath law. Okay, now there is a saying that we have a rule and we have an exception to the rule, and many times we have an exception to the exception. So the exceptions really eat up the rule, make the rule of none effect. Okay, so, and that's what they were doing. And they added these additional burdens onto the people. That is, the Pharisees did. They added these additional burdens onto the people. Now, one time Jesus said, you add these restrictions on the people that you're not even willing to lift with your finger. He called them hypocrites. And he's going to expose their hypocrisy today in this lesson. We're going to see that hypocrisy exposed. Okay, so we see verse 1, they invited him there to watch him, to set him up, to see if he was going to make a mistake in regard to the Sabbath law, to discredit his work and his character. And let's read verse 2. And behold, in other words, all of a sudden, there was a certain man before him which had the dropsies. Now, I understand that dropsies is a swelling of the body. That is, the body retains fluid. And you know, that's an issue. If the body retains fluid, especially around the heart and things like that, it's dangerous. So the man had a very serious condition. But remember, it was a Sabbath now. And we got a Sabbath law about work, okay? And we got exceptions to that. We got an additional condition and exceptions. Okay, let's go. So the man happened to be there. Now that he stays there, they probably said, well, I know Jesus is a very compassionate man. He's probably going to want to heal this man on the Sabbath, and we're going to get him there because you can't do any work on the Sabbath. Okay, let's go. So the man was there that was sick, and Jesus, this is verses 3, and Jesus answering spake unto the lawyers and the Pharisees. Now, you experts in the law, this is what he said. Okay, I want to ask you experts in the law. The lawyers, the scribes, the Pharisees, you are the experts in the law, right? Yes, we are. Okay, here's the question I have for you. Is it lawful? This is Jesus asking the question, it's in red. Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath? Now, he didn't ask lay people. He asked the experts in the law, or the so-called experts in the law. Is it lawful? This is a plain question. Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath? Yes or no? Okay, let's go to verse 4. And they held their peace. They were silent. The expert were silent. They didn't utter a word. They heard the question. It's very simple. Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath? Yes or no? They were silent. And this is continuing first. And he healed him. That is, Jesus healed the man and let him go. Now, the Pharisees could have said, yes, it is lawful to heal because that is showing compassion. It's lawful to heal, and he would have had the approval. Okay, I'm going to heal him. If they had said, no, it is not lawful to show compassion on a sick person who's made in the image of God. It is not lawful for you to heal him on the Sabbath. The people around said, wait a minute here. You mean you can't have compassion on a person that is sick, that's made in the image of God on the Sabbath? How is that showing mercy and love? So they refused. Again, let me read it again. 4, and they held their peace, meaning they were silent. They heard the question, they understood the question, they were experts in the law. So why can't you give me an answer? Okay, let's go to verse. Okay, that's the first outline. Is the dual setup? They were setting him up, and he asked them a question they couldn't answer it. So he took the man and he healed him. You can't answer the question. I'm going to go ahead and heal the man. I'm going to go ahead and show compassion on him. I gave you the opportunity to answer. Is it lawful to heal? Yes or no? If you say yes, I'm going to heal him. If you say no, the people are going to say, wait a minute, that's not showing compassion. That's not showing love. Now, let's go to the second outline. Going against the grain. Now, let's read 5. And answering them, saying, this is Jesus, which of you shall have an ass or an ox fallen in a pit and will not straightway pull him out on the Sabbath? Now, here's where he's going to show their hypocrisy. Okay, you mean to tell me you're going to save a donkey, but let the man die? Well, let the man die, but by all means get the donkey out. What kind of image is that showing to the people? Well, the Pharisees don't have no compassion at all. They rather let a man that's made in the image of God possibly die, but they will get a donkey out. What kind of compassion is that? So he showed their hand. Basically, he said, let the people judge who is following the spirit of the law more closely. You that saying you keeping the entire law, are you that by your actions will let a man that's made in the image of God possibly die because it's the Sabbath? You're not going to show mercy and compassion on him because it's the Sabbath, but you're going to get a donkey out of a ditch? How hypocritical is that? Anybody can see that hypocrisy. He said, which of you will have an ass or an ox falling in the ditch and not get him out? That's showing compassion on, you're going to show more compassion on a donkey that's not made in the image of God than a human that's made in the image of God? Are you serious? Okay, let's go to verse 6. And they could not answer him again to these things. So it's just like a person saying, well, you busted. The jig is up. You busted. They couldn't say, well, there's nothing they can say. It's the God principle is about mercy and love. How are you showing the principle of mercy and love by letting a sick man potentially die because it's the Sabbath? I'm not going to show mercy on the Sabbath for a human, someone made in the image of God, but I will show mercy on a donkey. That just shows where your heart is. And the people could see you guys don't have any compassion, any love for people at all. And as verse 6 said, and they could not answer him again to these things. So it was a setup from the beginning. But Jesus saw it, and he chose to show compassion on a man made in the image of God, and show their hypocrisy, where they would be willing to save a donkey versus someone made in the image of God. How compassionate is that? And that's our lesson today. When Jesus asked the question, is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath? The experts, remember again, the experts could not answer him. When they couldn't answer him, Jesus showed their hypocrisy for the world to see. We'd like to thank you for watching. We ask you to join us next week for another edition of the Sunday School Review. Thank you.